Today on the Basketball Manitoba Podcast, we have Uzoma Asagwara. Uzoma is a graduate of St. Norbert Collegiate, where they were ranked the number 2 high school player in the province. They went on to play at the University of Winnipeg, where they played 5 years with the Wesmen, as well as playing for the Canadian national team at the Pan American Games in 2007. During their 5 years, the Wesmen went on to the national tournament 2 times, finishing as high as 2nd place. Uzoma was recognized as CIS Second Team All-Canadian, CIS Championship Tournament All-Star, Canada West First and Second Team All-Star, and was named to the Canada West All-Rookie Team. In Uzoma's 5th and final year, they led the nation in scoring, and they are the all-time scoring leader in Wesmen history. Uzoma is now in politics as an MLA for the New Democratic Party representing Union Station. Now, here's my conversation with Uzoma Asagwara. And today on the Basketball Manitoba Podcast, we have the Honorable Uzoma Asagwara. We were talking before, right before I pressed record, I said, well, technically you're an MLA, so is your title honorable? And you were kind of explaining to me that you're unsure about that.
Yeah. I should probably know that. I should probably have that down, but you know what? It's MLA is fine. Some people say honorable. Some people just call me Ooze or Uzo, depending on when they met me, how they know me. So it's all good.
Exactly. I've just always known you as Uzo, so it's always an Uzo. Totally. Obviously, I knew that was a short version of your full name, but I mean, we'll refer to you as Uzo, if that's okay for the podcast.
Of course. Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, like I was saying, the other thing I was saying offline too is like you're super busy, obviously, with the role you're doing. I mean, we're all busy in our own right, but you do this type of stuff all the time. Like you're talking and you're speaking, so it's quite common for you. I mean, this isn't it's not weird for you to do this, but still super grateful to have you, considering how busy you are and you're a public figure and all that. Your journey in this podcast is about the journey and kind of how basketball maybe influenced or is a big part of the journey. And we really want to share stories and kind of extract memories, advice, and really just share that with the basketball community. And obviously, you're a perfect person to do that, because I feel like I've known you for a while, seen your basketball journey from afar. So this is going to be really, really cool for me to kind of dig in a little bit. So I guess I'll just start off straight off the top. What's your earliest basketball memory?
Ooh, good question. No one's ever asked me that before.
Come on, for real?
No, I'm serious. No one's ever asked me that. I love that question. My earliest basketball memory, I don't know. I guess it would probably have to be in elementary school, right? Like you get those, you just learn it in school, right? You have gym class and you get introduced to different sports. And so I was introduced to basketball in school. And I was a really athletic kid. I was a very high energy kid who had a hard time focusing. I had a hard time sitting still. And so it was really important for me to be physically active so that I could get that energy out and be able to focus and be present when I was supposed to be academically. So I played a lot of sports, but basketball would have just been introduced as part of like the curriculum in grade school. And like many other sports, I loved it. I just loved being active. I took to it. So probably, I guess it would have been, kindergarten or whenever it's introduced.
Yeah. So then, I mean, you get introduced to the game, and that's a hard question to answer, because, and so I'll kind of back up here. Whenever we do these interviews, oftentimes people say, well, can you send the questions ahead of time? And because of the format of this it's a conversation, right? This isn't a hard interview, and I don't want people to have the answers. I didn't want you to be able to look and be like, oh, well, let me get an answer for this. I wanted, these natural answers, because the next question here, or the next line of thinking is, well, okay, it was introduced to you at some time when you were young. You kind of don't have a specific memory, or a set of memories. However, you probably have an idea of some people who introduced the game to you when you were young, or people you started playing with. A teacher or some, friends that were like, hey, let's go play Uzo.
That's so funny that you say that, you asked that, because I was trying to remember the other day, and I don't know why I ever forgot it, but I was trying to remember my gym teacher's name in grade school and junior high, and his name was Mr. Deckert.
Okay.
And he was like this, I think he was an Olympic handball player. Like he was some super athlete back in his day.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just he just loved sports. And his enthusiasm for sport, for me, was contagious. And he was always so supportive of me trying to play as many sports as possible. I think from a very young age, I picked up on the fact that he liked that I was good at sports.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that affirmation. I really liked that energy, that positive energy from adults, that recognition of me being good at something. And so he was like, every sport that he introduced, that he taught us, that I picked up on, even the stuff I wasn't really good at, he really encouraged me to, at recess, during, what were those things called, like in between, like at lunchtime, intramurals.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right? Remember those? Yeah. So I did all of that, and he was a big proponent of that. And he was interesting because he would actually really push me. So very young, he would challenge me to do things in different ways. Like if we were playing badminton, he'd have me play against two people instead of just playing one. Like he was that guy, right? He was like always trying to push me to be better. He's like, okay, everybody's running like 10 lines or whatever. You got to make 15 hoops or free throws. And he's like, you know what? He's just make twice as many because I know you can. So he was somebody who very early on, like saw that interest in me and really amplified that, which was good. I think actually was probably a game changer in terms of me being really passionate about basketball.
Mm-hmm. And so was this middle school you were saying?
Grade school and then middle school. So
and then middle school.
Yeah, he would have been my gym teacher for pretty much all of it, because I started at Park LaSalle, which is in St. Norbert, grade 2, I believe we moved there, and then over to junior high, grades 6 and 7, something like that. And he was still for the most part, there's a couple other folks as well, but for the most part, my gym teacher and coach.
So then would you say that was it Mr. Decker's was your earliest mentor at the time? With regards to basketball and sport, I guess specifically?
I think so. One of, which like, again, it's funny. I only really started thinking about him a lot recently, because I've been thinking and reflecting a lot on, the importance of adults, the importance of community members, recognizing the talents in young people, or recognizing the barriers or experiences in young people and showing up for them. And he's definitely somebody who, he was probably one of my earliest athletic mentors. And I also recognized that he had been a good athlete, right? Like I have these sort of like loose memories of him being on posters or something. Like I just knew he had been a big deal. I didn't know what handball was. I thought it was a strange sport, but I knew, like, the handball with like the little blue ball, you just kind of hit it, cup the hand and hit the thing.
Oh, that one. It's like against the wall.
Handball, not team handball. Yeah, like that. Okay. Hitting it against the wall. He, I think he was really, really good at that. And I thought that was such an odd sport. And I didn't like it much because it hurt my little hand. but I love that he had been this super athlete at some point. And I really appreciated the way that he was always excited about it when it came to us as kids. So I would say he was probably one of my earliest mentors for sure.
Well, it's an interesting reflection because, playing basketball myself, and I'm sure you've had similar experiences, you run into people. And typically as you're growing up, they're adults. I mean, obviously you make friends, but that are mentors, and they kind of guide you and steer you, down the path. And they're just so important. So it is an interesting thing that you were reflecting just recently on how important that is. And that's something that I've, being that like I coached a lot after and was very active with youth. I actually stopped coaching for a long time, went back and started coaching again, just to be around kids, just to be able to, help them in any way I could, because there's an interesting relationship that takes place, because anyone who enjoys doing it, typically the mentee, I guess, enjoys their, mentorship, but the mentor also gains a certain level of energy
Absolutely.
from those experiences. So it's very interesting. I know exactly the mindset on both sides. And
Yeah.
so you had mentioned, Mr. Decker, early mentor.
Mhm.
Obviously, you went on to play, you know, at some very high levels after high school and so
Mhm.
forth. But who are some of your other maybe more basketball specific mentors, whether that was in high school, in college, or after?
You know what? Like, there's some people who are really key along the way who probably have no idea how important they were. Like, I was definitely a kid who had limited resources, right? I wasn't going to camps. My parents couldn't afford that. I didn't know about tryouts. I didn't know how to navigate the systems that a lot of typically elite athletes might navigate as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really dependent on people showing me kindness throughout my journey. I think about the fact that the summer of eighth grade or seventh grade, I was playing basketball right across the street because they built a new junior high, and I would play ball there every day, all day. Like raining, I was there playing, getting beat up on by the older guys, you know what I mean? But I was always there playing. And one day, this woman now, but a girl, she was an older girl when I was a kid, Jody Semyonuk, came up to me and was like, "How old are you?" As if she's grown. She was like 2 years older than me. But me as a kid, it's like, yo, this is
Yeah,
this is a big woman talking to me,
of course.
And I was like, I'm like, how old, 13, 14, whatever how old I was. And she's like, are you going to St. Norbert, the high school? And I said, yeah, I'm going to go to St. Norbert next year. And she said, oh, you're going to try out for varsity. And I was like, well, I won't be able to. I'm only going to be in grade 9. And she's like, you're trying out for varsity. I see you out here every day. You're good enough. We're going to have you on our team. Keep practicing. She was intense. Like I was taken aback. It's intimidating for my age, right? This older girl, popular person in high school. Sure enough, I show up to school, first or second day, and the high school teacher, varsity teacher, coach, Dennis Marinelli, Mr. Marinelli, who is like one of my dear friends to this day, approached me in the hallway with Jody, and she was like, "That's the one. That's the kid that I saw playing, and they need to try out for the varsity team." And he's like, "Okay." And so I did, and I made the team. I played varsity for 4 years. Marinelli was a fantastic coach, an unbelievable support to me. He's been an unbelievable support beyond sport, beyond my career that way. But Jody is a good example of somebody as a kid who went out of her way, brought somebody and say, this is an opportunity that you need to know about, and pushed me basically into it, and then talked to the adult and said, you need to know about this person, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think about Jody's, I think about Marinelli's, I think about WNBA basketball players. Grade 7 was when they established the WNBA. They've been around now. They just celebrated a big anniversary. That league is outstanding. There's like OGs in the WNBA that inspired me, that were playing when I was coming up, who are still in the league right now, which I think is amazing. Like Sue Bird is a good example, right? 7-time Olympic gold medalist. I got to compete against her. She was on a poster on my wall as a teenager, right? Like, it's ridiculous. And then I also think about, the bigger names that we all know about, Dennis Rodman, Michael Jordan. Those are athletes that inspired me from very, very young, and for very similar and different reasons. Jordan was an inspiration because he was the best, right? And he was such a good role model in so many ways and a ferocious competitor. Rodman inspired me because he was one of the best, but he was also incredibly unique. The guy was a big personality. His gender identity and his sexuality was always sort of up for debate. It was being questioned. He was a dynamic human being beyond the sport, which for me as a young queer kid, basketball player, navigating all that other stuff, that was important too. So it's been a wide range of mentors throughout my life, from coaches to celebrities to Jodies.
Shout out, was it Marinelli, Jody? Shout out. It's a great way you frame that, because people open doors for us, right? Now you didn't have to play. You could have said, no, I don't want to. I want to, but they were insistent. They opened those doors up. And I think that's super important. I mean, it's kind of how we started the conversation with that, identifying talent and allowing that talent to flourish and having a pathway for those people to achieve things. Because again, if Jody never goes up to you or those conversations don't happen, I mean, obviously, your life's going to take a different path. And I think that's just so critical when it comes to the mentor, mentee, and I think just helping people generally. I think those I mean, I obviously have a fondness for basketball. I mean, just because of the effect it's had on me and the people I've met. But I've heard so many stories just like yours, and every time I'm just like, you're smiling. You're like, yeah, it's awesome. It's great. I love hearing those success stories. Now you had mentioned like St. Norbert. St. Norbert's a 3A school. I don't know if it was a 2A back then or 3A back then or 4.
Calm down. It was 3A.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Sometimes these schools change their classification, but you went out to you were at St. Norbert, 3A school. Shout out to the 3A basketball players and coaches. Often don't get enough respect in the game. But how do you feel playing at a 3A school shaped your basketball experience versus playing at a powerhouse school? Like, you had said you're in the 9th grade and you're playing varsity. If you go to a powerhouse school, maybe that opportunity isn't there. So do you feel that shaped your experience and how did it, I guess is the question, versus playing in those power schools where, they're going to the big tournaments, going into 4A provincials. They're always, they're dominating. It's the schools that everyone talks about. The players all get ranked.
I mean, it certainly, it did leave at times something to be desired, right? Like you kind of think, what would my opportunities be like? Would I get better coaching, better training, playing maybe with more competitive athletes who play on club teams and, have access to different resources to be better and push you harder. But it was actually going into the 11th grade, I believe it was, or 10th grade, that I had a conversation with Marinelli that really cemented a value for me and had me make the decision to stay at a AAA school. So I was getting attention as an athlete. And there are a lot of people who were encouraging me to go to a bigger school, go to FRC, go to Vincent Massey, go somewhere else, go somewhere bigger, more opportunities for scholarships, better coaching, better athletes, whatever. And I had this conversation with Marinelli one day. We had it a couple of times, but one day in particular, we sat down and he looked at me and he said, Uzo, listen, you're an amazing athlete. You're a good student. You're a good kid. He said, wherever you decide to play, I'm going to support you. He said, if you go to a 4A school, a bigger school, I completely understand why you'd make that choice. You can still come to this school early in the mornings or after school. I'll open it up for you and I'll rebound for you. We're still going to support you on your journey so that you can achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. We just want to see you be successful and be happy. But if you choose to stay here, know that you've got a big team of people, family of people that believe in you, that will do whatever is necessary for you to be able to access those same opportunities. And so for me, that conversation was so monumental because it was, I shouldn't say it was the first example because it's not. It was a concrete example and moment of someone teaching me and showing me what genuine care looks like. Right? Here's a person who cares about my overall well-being as a person and doesn't have any personal vested interest that they're putting ahead of my own. Right? And so I was like, this person, this school, these people care about me as a whole person. They're not, simply trying to exploit me. And I don't know that I'm going to get that somewhere else. Right. And so he set the example for me in terms of when I pursued other things in my life, the kinds of people that I want to be supported by, the kinds of relationships that I want to build and have, the people, the helpers that you need to look for along the way should have those kinds of values. And he role modeled that, something really important, especially as like a cisgender white man, right? At that time, we weren't using that language. I didn't have that lens, but he role modeled something for me that was very important and that has never left me. And so I made the decision to stay, and he followed through, and they followed through on all of that and then some. You know, like there are different things I went through. I had, you know, in a lot of ways, a really challenging childhood and upbringing, and they were always in my corner. I never doubted that. And I couldn't have asked for a better support system and better role models than what I had at St. Norbert Collegiate. So, you know, I think that what I didn't get out of that big school experience, you know, doesn't matter. I got so much more out of that AAA small school experience. And you know what? They didn't have to, but I had a good career there, and they surprised me at the end of it, my senior year, with this surprise ceremony in the gymnasium. Invited my family, retired my jersey. Who does that for you know what I mean? Who does that for a kid? It's those people are incredible. So no, I encourage people, you know, pay attention to who's got you for all the right reasons, and without asking for anything from you in return.
And that's a super valuable lesson right there. That's and again, and this is coming from someone who now you consider a friend, at the time was a mentor. And I think that's great advice, because there is a difference between people who are going to do things for you in a selfless manner and people who, like you had mentioned, want to, you know, take advantage of the, you know, the things they can, almost, you know, steal your energy, for lack of a better term, or just take advantage of you because of the skills you may have. And I think that's super critical. And people out there who are listening to this, if you're a younger person or you're making it, you have a decision to make, just like you did, Uzo, where, you know, I don't know what I should do. I think there might be something better for me over here, is to really take a close look at the people. And that's just unbelievable advice. Who is in your circle? What are they saying? And how have they been in the past? And how are they reacting even to the situation you might be bringing up now, which could, you know, like you said, you're going to leave this school. Anyone who's looking at that from a selfish lens is going to say, okay, well, this is hurting me, or, you know, they may, they're not going to say what Mr. Marinelli said to you, that's just not happening. If someone's coming from a selfish lens. So, I think it's just super, super great information. Pay attention to the people in your circle and how are they treating you, and pay attention to the people who are giving you attention, because it might not be for the right reasons. This is great advice. And so obviously, I mean, like you said, you got your jersey retired in your last year there. You went on to play at the University of Winnipeg, and you're literally representing the home city. Winnipeg is in the name of the university. You know, they're obviously super successful, Canada West All-Star. You were a second team All-Canadian there. You were an absolute bucket from what I remember. And then I went back and looked, and I was like, what? So I was like, you averaged 28 points per game in your last year. Like I knew this, but then I was like, wow. I'm like, you know, typically like leading scorers in the country, it's like, yeah, you know, 24, 23, maybe 22 even. It's like the 28 points per game. It's a lot. It's a lot. Now, you were a bucket. I remember that. So again, not surprising, but then also surprising at the same time. But all that said, I'm actually curious, what do you, if you're thinking, you know, right now I'm asking you in the moment, what's your most memorable moment as a collegiate basketball player?
On the court?
That's for you to decide.
Okay, I'm gonna talk about on the court, because I mean, there's a lot that happens off the court that really makes the experience, but there's a few moments on the court that, like, you just look back on and you think, what? What? So obviously we had and you know this because you were part of the rivalry. We had a huge rivalry with the University of Manitoba. It was just like, it's still in my blood, right? And there was a couple of games where you just felt like the stars aligned. And, you know, back then people really came out to support and watch our games. Like they were a huge draw. So we play the Bisons, and our game, the gym is full. right? And those were hard games for my family would come check out the games. My mom, she struggled in terms of her anxiety levels in general at the games, but in these games in particular, the university, the athletics department was amazing. They always had a spot for my mom out front for when she could come. She worked a lot, so she couldn't come to a whole lot of games, but she had a spot there when she could. And they also recognized she really struggled in games that were high intensity. So they were cool to just have her stand. She would stand outside the gym doors and watch from outside the doors. And they were like outdoors. They would check on her.
Oh, man.
So this was one of those games. It was, I think, to go to Canada West finals or something like that. And it was best of 3 series. And we were game 3 or whatever it was at home. It was close. And the gym, you can't even hear people. You can't hear each other. It's so loud. And I remember this moment because it was something that, you have these moments as an athlete, as a ball player, where there's certain things you kind of work on when you're working on your game that you don't think you're ever actually going to really be able to do and pick up or whatever. And I can't remember if we were down or we were tied, but I was inbounding the ball in the Bison end, so under their basket. And, we only have a few minutes left or whatever in the game. And one of their best players, Sophia Chin, she was like, Sophia. Yep. If Sophia gets hot and starts hitting threes, like it's a game changer. So Sophia was guarding me, but on the inbound, she had turned her back to me. And so I just, in that moment, I was like, and so inbound the ball off her backside, jumped in, got it, made the layup. She fouled me and won. And I remember being on the ground and losing my, everyone's screaming. And I remember getting up and looking at my coach, Tanya, because it was a cheeky thing to do, right? It's not something you really, but it's
risky. It's risky.
And Tanya looked at me and she pointed at me and I pointed at her. And that was like, there's many moments I think of, and it's probably because, alumni, different universities. So I'm thinking about, those games against the Bisons. And that was an amazing moment. That was fun. But really what I'm reflecting on is the rivalry, the intensity of the competition, the intensity of those moments where you get to express yourself creatively as an athlete. And for me, that's actually what I remember most fondly about my university basketball experience, was building the relationships, like lifelong relationships with other athletes, getting to travel and do all the things I never would have been able to afford to do. I never would have been able to experience had I not been an athlete, but also just the ways in which I was able to express myself creatively on the basketball court. You don't realize it until that outlet is gone. Right? It wasn't until I retired and I stopped playing that I was like, oh my gosh, that was actually more than just running up and down the court and scoring hoops and whatever. It was the way that I expressed so much of who I am. So I think about those moments where you have a little something you get to do out of the book that you didn't think maybe you would, and how much fun that was.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I remember that moment now that you retell it. Because I'm like, okay, where are you going with this? And then I was like, yeah, I remember that for sure. The other thing I remember is too, you mentioned just expressing yourself, and like you were a player who truly did. I mean, okay, well, we're not gonna, you had I just finished saying you averaged 28 a game. So to say you had a green light is it's accurate. It might even be an understatement, but you were able to express yourself like truly through basketball, because and again, and even just the way like you would dress and carry yourself, like there was a certain, and it still exists in you today, obviously in a much different format. But like there was a certain, like you said, it was a way you express your identity, and that was so obvious at the time. Right. And so, Okay, so if that's your most memorable on the court moment, like if you probably get a little bit of visceral sensations from it when you think back of it, right? Because I can we've all been there as basketball players. You have a big player, you do something in a key moment, and the rush that you get is undescribable. So now, just generally speaking, this can be at any level you ever played at. Your most memorable basketball moment, period. And this can be off the court, on the court. Something else that stands out.
I mean, that's tough. I feel like there's several of them that are just, I mean, we had some incredible moments as a team at the university level, right? At national championships, losing the national championship final as a rookie, also, winning a bronze, like huge moments, powerful moments collectively with a really representative team. Because our team was, we had Filipino teammates, we had Black teammates, we had, Black African teammates, we had American, British. Yep. We had people from all across the country on our team. And so having those moments with such a diverse and representative crew was great. But one of my proudest moments had to be on the national team, of course, right? It was something that I never really thought about growing up as being able to achieve. Wasn't really on my radar. Like I said, we didn't have extra funds. So I wasn't one of those kids who was going to all these fancy camps and had Team Canada gear or brand name gear. I wasn't that kid. I played basketball in like beat up shoes. I remember being in the 10th grade and playing in basketball shoes that had no grip on the bottom, right? They're like $10 shoes from Zeller, whatever it was. And my coach teaching me that if you lick your hands and then you wipe your shoes off, you could stop. Because it's like, it's hard, you can't change direction. So, there's this moment on the national team where my first time being lined up with the team in the uniform, my family name on the back of the jersey, Canada on the front, and hearing the national anthem and seeing my name on the board, where I just felt overwhelmed with the moment. I felt overwhelmed to be a part of something so much bigger than myself. I felt really proud. I felt really humbled, and it felt surreal. It really did feel kind of surreal to be able to be there. And I also felt acutely aware that I wished that so many other people could have an experience in some way, right? Which is odd, because when I first made the national team, I was actually going through a lot more things that people have no idea about. How hard it was to get there, how hard it was to have the personal resource to be there. And I felt so grateful, and I felt so humbled, and I also felt like, I wish that so many other people would get to experience whatever it is for them, right? That gives them that feeling, get to experience that. So yeah, that moment probably is hugely significant in terms of something that stands out. Being able to stand shoulder to shoulder with people from across the country with our family names on our jerseys to represent our country in competition was pretty cool.
Were you ever unsure, like, if you could play at that level? Like, when you got the offer, were you like, can I, like, even before you answer that question, how'd you get on the team? And then maybe answer that question. Like, what's the story? Did they call you? You got to go to a tryout?
That's interesting. That's actually how did I get on the team? So interestingly enough, before I actually made the team, so a year and a half or two before, I went to an open tryout. So Tanya McKay, my coach at the University of Winnipeg, said there's a one-day open tryout in BC. Would you want to go? I was like, yeah, of course I'd love to go. And so they flew me out there for this one day. It was like a 3-hour open tryout. I stayed with a teammate and went there, did my best. And the assistant coach at the time, Mike McNeil, I went up to him after the trial because nobody who went there made it. Nobody. And I thought I played pretty well, but I competed pretty well, pretty hard. Went up to him afterwards and I asked him, like, is there anything that I can and should be doing so that the next time I try out, I make the team? Any feedback you can give me at all? And Mike grabbed my arms. He kind of went like this. And he's like, well, got to do something about those arms. And I'm thinking I'm jacked. At that point, I'm thinking I should be up there at best form. I'm strong.
Yeah.
He kind of like wiggled my arms like they're little noodle arms or something like that. And then he said to me, and you know what, like, maybe the national team isn't really for you. Like, probably think about overseas. Yeah. Think about overseas. There's opportunities there. So that's the feedback he gave me. And I was livid. I was disappointed, but I was really, really upset.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, who is this guy, coach or not, of the national team, to tell me what I can and cannot achieve? Mm-hmm. And also, I'm jacked. So I went home. I was salty about it, for a couple of days. And then I just got to work. I called up our trainer and I was like, listen, like, I really want to make the national team. They said I'm too small, like I'm not strong enough. Clearly there's a lot I need to work on. So I changed, like, literally from there, I changed everything. I changed how I ate. I changed how I slept. I changed how I lifted weights. I changed who I trained with. I realized at that point physically that I was much fitter and stronger and faster than most of the women that I was training with. And so I started training with guys, guys from different sports, because, I would get different things out of that, right? Mm-hmm. Sherwin, who was one of my trainers at the time, who was the trainer of the university team, really pushed me. Like he took it to another level. He's like, okay, fine. Like we're going to really step this up. And it was incredible to see, once I broke myself out of the mold that I thought I was supposed to be training in, what my body was actually capable of, and what I could mentally push myself to do. And so by the time I was in my senior year, my final year playing, we were at Canada West finals, I believe. And Alison McNeil, the head coach, approached me in the stands and told me I needed to try out. She's like, you're going to get an invitation to the invitational tryout. I expect to see you there. Because I lacked experience, I had never been part of any national team training program. They actually had me go to the open tryout in BC before the invitational. So I flew out early. This was, however, maybe a month or whatever too later. I had to build up to that tryout. I actually went to the open tryout in British Columbia first for a full day, which was so hard. I was like, I had never done anything like that. The warm-up had me cooked. I was like, I barely made it through the warm-up. I'm like, what is this? And then they took us from there to the invitational tryout, and from the invitational, I made the team. So it was a journey to get there. First being told basically that I wasn't cut out for it, and to think about other options. Had to change the way that I approached the game, which changed the way my last year in university, right? That's part of the reason why I was able to be the scorer that I was. I changed the way that I trained. And then eventually, it all came together.
Wow. So I guess, that's a whole experience, and that was just the lead up to actually making the squad. And then you all went out to participate. Was it the Pan American Games?
That's right.
That year. Okay. So then taking the whole experience, tryout, travel, everything that goes into it, what were some things that surprised you about the experience? You thought it was going to be one way and it turned out to be something completely different, or you're like, really, this is how it is here, whether it be good, bad, strange.
I think, one thing that did surprise me at that time, I don't know how the program runs now. Lisa has been the head coach for quite some time, and they've been very successfully, deservedly so. They've built that program. Those athletes are outstanding. I think something that did surprise me was the ways in which at that time you were always competing even when you're on the team, right? And it might sound silly to some people, but it's like, what I'm saying is, if you make a roster to go to the Pan American Games, doesn't mean you're going to make the roster to go to the Olympic qualifiers, right? Doesn't mean you're going to be starting in the exhibition game against, China when they come to Canada. So it was like a daily mental grind of constantly feeling, for me anyway, from where I was at the time, feeling not safe, right? Which is great in the sense that it can bring out the best in you, and you're always competing, and it's always in the line. You're always trying to put your best foot forward in all the ways. But it can be, in some ways, it can be a little detrimental, because you sometimes you worry, right? You're always worried that like this one bad practice or this one mistake is going to be the thing that gets you cut from that roster for that trip. Or, you know what I mean? So it was like, for me, and I think a part of that was me lacking the experience, having not been with the national team program before, right? That was a steep curve, learning to find that balance of continuing to push myself creatively as an athlete, continuing to push myself competitively as an athlete, and not always feel like every second there's something on the line, because I think psychologically that wasn't the best thing for me. And I didn't necessarily have all of the tools to navigate that very well right out of the gate. It takes time. But certainly, like I said, I think things have evolved since then. And I also think that, over time, I developed more language around how to communicate that and figure out some skills around that. And I hope that, more athletes develop those skills around that sort of environment much earlier on in sport.
So when you were playing, and I guess this is the first question I asked you, then I rewound it. So were you ever unsure, like you're now, you're standing there, national anthem, there's another country on the other side. Were there ever that self-doubt where you're like, can I play at this level? Or were you always just confident, like, whatever, it's basketball, I'm going to go out there and hoop?
No, definitely. I think that there were moments for sure where I was like, I mean, I made the team, so I felt like, okay, I deserve to be here. I've earned this. I've worked so hard to be there. But definitely there were moments where you give yourself a bit of a gut check. You're like, damn, can I, when you think about some of the best teams in the world, it's like, can I compete at that level? It's one thing to beat, maybe, I don't know, at the time anyway, Team Mexico as an example, versus competing against Team USA, right? Teams with totally different resources, totally different populations they're drawing from, etc. So I definitely had moments of questioning what I needed to do in order to get myself to a place where we are competing legitimately with some of the best in the world. But one of the great messages that I got from that experience was, like, if you want to be a world-class athlete, you have to train like a world-class athlete. That was just a simple message they gave us. And that's something that I've applied, and I think people have to apply to your life, right? If you want certain things, you've got to train and work like you want those things. And that's something that's never left me.
That's unbelievable advice. It's straightforward, but it's true in any world that you're trying to achieve success in. Really, absolutely. You have to mimic what the successful people do and work hard. So, I mean, you've mentioned now so many different stories and mentors and things you've learned. So this next question is kind of in line with that, and so I'm curious about, you've had some really big obstacles you face in your career, whether it be on the court, off the court. I know you mentioned some of the stuff that you were struggling with as a human, while being a basketball player at the same time. But can you maybe talk about maybe some of those obstacles and then maybe what it taught you about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting because I've spent a lot of years talking to folks kind of generally about overcoming obstacles and challenges. I was a young queer kid who never talked about it, who didn't really understand that part of myself, who felt a lot of shame around that part of my identity and who I am. didn't have the language for it, didn't see myself reflected anywhere, felt a lot of fear for what I might lose or have to face if I were open and explored that part of who I am. And then there are other things that I experienced and challenges that I faced that, I didn't talk about for a long time because, there wasn't a culture of talking about those things, right?
Yeah.
But I try to talk about them more now so that people know that, yeah, we all live with realities sometimes that aren't comfortable, that aren't fair, that aren't easy, but ultimately they are not anything that we can't overcome.
Mm.
And they are oftentimes things that actually equip us with the skills and the tools and the resources to excel at certain things, to actually demolish certain barriers and thrive. And so my queerness, gender identity, all of those things, were a work in progress that I had to navigate. And I talk about now openly to make sure that especially kids recognize that they can have all of those experiences and identities and achieve anything, and that they deserve to take up space as whole people, as happy people who receive dignity and respect everywhere they go. Some of the other challenges I face would certainly be around, family dynamics even, right? Like I grew up in what was at times a pretty tumultuous household. And growing up as a young Black kid, West African, Nigerian kid in a community where we didn't really talk about those things and not really knowing how to talk about those challenges was tough. And recognizing now, and for the past several years, the importance of people having safe people to talk to, right? Knowing that those same people who are there for you athletically, academically, socially, are also often the same people you can talk to about, hey, maybe there's some stuff going on in my life that I don't really know how to navigate or talk about. You don't have to communicate those things perfectly, but it's so important to communicate about them, right? Mental health is another one, and it's a big one. It's something that I feel like athletes are now talking about more than ever, thankfully. But I think back to university when my own mental health at one point was really compromised. And the best thing I ever did, well, first of all, Tanya, my head coach, pulled me out of practice at one point and straight up just was like, what's wrong, right? 20-nothing-year-old kid. I had lost a bunch of weight. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping, showing up to practice every day. But I didn't even realize in practice that I wasn't keeping up because physically I was so unwell due to my mental health being compromised. And Tanya highlighted that for me. She flagged it. I was like, what's up? And then made me go see a sports psychologist. It was like, you gotta go talk, right? You're gonna go talk to somebody because there's something going on. And then I took the step of going to talk to a therapist at the University of Winnipeg. And game changing for me, just being able to go and sit and talk to somebody and tell this person about what I was going through. And I talked about it with this person like I was like, well, whatever, it's my life. Like, don't know why I feel like crap all the time, but this is what's going on. And she looked at me and was like, you feel like crap all the time because of everything you just told me is going on. Like, what? Right? So those are just a few areas, but ultimately I think what a lot of that comes down to, honestly, is your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And being able to talk about those things and get support, right? And treat it as important as your physical health is.
The thing that you're speaking to summarize is really, and I think this is so critical, and you actually called it out for athletes today. I mean, there are so many more resources, and we're allowed to, I think is the right word, to talk about this stuff. Before it's like, I don't know, like maybe take that somewhere else. But as athletes, we are humans first. I mean, and any player, coach, or anyone out there that's listening to this understand and doesn't really understand what I'm saying is, if you have, and using you as an example, your story, if you have an athlete who is compromised outside of their sport, they're not going to perform as well. So even if it's only for selfish reasons, like we need to be performing, that's enough for you to have space for this and have resources for your athletes to come to you. And again, like I said, if you're a younger athlete right now, don't be afraid to reach out, because again, if you're not taking care of your mental well-being, well, good luck. Your emotional well-being, you're not going to perform the same way you would on the court, the same way if you're not taking care of your physical well-being and your training. So those things, it's that holistic, idea, like where you're a human being and you're going to achieve certain things. You're going to have more energy. You're just going to feel better about yourself. And as a result of that, you're going to perform better. And those are all positives,
And you nailed it. Like, it's so important. And that's why I mentioned Tanya pulling me out of practice and just flagging that in that moment. Because so often if you're not well, if you're struggling mentally or emotionally, sometimes you can't really see it clearly.
Yes.
Or you don't know how to articulate it, or you don't know who to articulate it to, for whatever the reasons are. It's so important for coaches and staff and for other people to be the ones to approach those folks and those athletes and say, I see this, I see you. Is there something I can do to help you? Here are some resources. Like, we need for folks to be able to also take that step and reach out to athletes, because they don't always have the capacity to do that. And we need the people around us to be able sometimes to open that door and encourage us to walk through it.
Well said. So we're going to wrap up right away. But before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question. Okay. I'm sure you've answered this many, many times just within this interview. But I always like to end the interviews with these types of questions. So I'll just read it directly. So if you can give a message to every basketball player, regardless of age, so it's just people. I mean, you can talk to anyone you want. I mean, this is really up to you. But they love the game. What would the message be?
A message to anybody of all age.
And again, I would say just speak to the person that you want to speak to, right? Because if you're a coach, hey, maybe you're going to speak to coaches. If you're an active player, you might speak to active players who are trying to do what you do. It can be anything. And I mean, again, like I said, you've given us so much already. But just whatever comes to your mind, to your heart, whatever comes out, just a message, something that you would want to leave. If it was like your last basketball message, like, hey, it's the last thing I'm ever going to say about basketball, and I want to make sure this gets to somebody. What would it be?
I would say invest in that love. Invest in that love, because love, regardless of what it is that you love and whatever it is that sparks love in you, in order for that to be sustainable and for that to grow, you've got to invest in it, right? So take the time to be present in it. Take the time to learn about how you best express your love for the sport. Take the time to understand how you need the sport to love you back, but invest in that love.
Love that. I've never heard that before. And it makes sense. It makes sense. And like you said, in anything that you say you love, you want that love to flourish and continue, you do need to invest in it. That's unbelievable information. I love the sentiment. And we'll wrap up there. If there's anything else that you want to leave us with,
this is great.
We will get out of here.
I'm a big fan of you, Darcy. You know that. I think you're a really good human, and I love the way you communicate about the game and about health, and the way you're open about what really matters, and encouraging people to be open about their relationship to the sport and their relationship to their health. And so I think these conversations are really valuable and important, and I want to give you a shout out for creating platforms for this. I think it's really great.
Well, thank you so much. And again, obviously shout out to Basketball Manitoba for hosting this. We obviously have a ton of super cool guests, and you're one of the early guests. You were one of the first people on the list. So you'll be one of the early episodes. And, I'm just hoping that everyone enjoys these types of conversations. And I'm also very fortunate and grateful just to be part of these conversations and getting to ask people questions and kind of dig and the amount of times just in our conversation when you were talking about when you're on the floor. See, I'm one of those I feel stuff. So I was like, yeah, like I could feel it, So for me, this is unbelievable, and I appreciate you taking the time. And we'll just wrap it up there. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share this series, and reach out to us with your comments on the show. Thanks again for joining us.